Shall we begin?
Hey YouTube friends, Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And today's question is, when you're about to stock a tank, should you go with larger or smaller cichlids? Now this is something you've got to give some thought to if you're going to get into cichlids, especially African. I'm sure South American as well, because I've seen some of them pretty large, even though I have no experience in keeping them. But when you're stocking your tank, you have to ask questions like, how big of a tank am I ultimately gonna want to end up with? If you're in an apartment, let's say second floor apartment or a smaller house, and you're thinking you're gonna be maxing out at about maybe 60, 70 gallons, you should stick with smaller cichlids. I mean, it just goes to reason. Something like this, like the red cap that you can see here, fish like the, I have a little Maduka orange flame tail. This fish will get up around 5 inches. The 500 is not going to get much. The bicolor 500 isn't going to get much larger than that. Maybe a bit larger, maybe 6 inches max. Other fish in this 100 are not going to get that big. However, some of them in there are going to get up around 10, maybe up to 10 inches. This star sapphire, this Maduka, the Maduka white lips, some of these are going to get larger, but they're in 100, so there's some room to grow. The fish that you see behind me, maybe the tetrastigma you could keep in a 60. It'd be a little cramped. Maybe the Taiwan reef, and maybe the hawk, quite possibly, but certainly not that. Not this. What you see behind me here. Not that eye biter, and certainly not that Venusus. Now, very often you can buy a Venusus, very commonly in a Petco or something like that, a local fish store, and they're very cute. They're called giraffe haps sometimes. So you'll grab one or two, and you'll grab another fish with it. Let's say another kind of cichlid, maybe an OB or something. And in about 3 or 4 months, maybe 6 months, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a Venusus that is probably twice the size of the OB, and probably terrorizing it, because they just put on a lot of size and a lot of bulk very, very quickly. So really think it out. Do I want large cichlids? Do I want small cichlids? What kind of tank am I going to end up with? Do I want to start graduating the size of my tanks and end up ultimately in a 220 or a 300 or even something larger, which at some point, I mean, if you look at this, the size that the Malawi trout is putting on in the tank behind me, I may at some point be forced to make a difficult decision of either going to an 8-foot tank and or having to sell that fish. So these are the kind of problems you'll run into if you don't think out how you're going to be scaling your tank. So you make the choice. Do you want to have smaller fish? If you want small fish, smaller cichlids from Lake Malawi, think about your things like your red cap, beautiful fish. They do like to be maybe separate from other types of fish ultimately, but my red cap has done very well with similar size fish, with a variety of similar size fish. As soon as they get any larger than the red cap, they get moved out to the 100. Consider something like a flame tail. Flame tails do not get that big. If you absolutely have to have a hap, some haps, consider something like a Z-Rock, pretty mellow. They don't get too large, and so think it out. Go to things like Cichlid Forum. You'll be able to see what the average sizes are of these fish once they hit full size adulthood, and don't make the mistake of putting fish that are going to be too large in a tank that's too small, or putting together a combination of fish where down the road, one fish is, or several fish are going to be simply overwhelming the other fish, and you're not going to have anywhere to graduate them to, and you'll be forced to either sell or end up having to do something to fix the situation. In other words, be forced into some action that you might not want to take. Okay, so give it some thought. Do I, before you stock your tank, do I go large or do I go small? Right now, as you know, I have a combination. I have some smaller cichlids that I can keep segregated from these beasts in the tank behind me. So I'm fortunate that way, and somehow I was able to convince my wife that I needed more and more tanks for the good of the fish. Okay, all right, that's it for me. Just a thought I had that I thought I would share with you. Thank you so much for tuning in.